"Don't waste your money on me," said the enslaved Apache woman, yet the rancher took her home. The sun hung low over the desert plains, painting the horizon in shades of gold and crimson. Dust rose in lazy clouds, swirling around the legs of tired horses. In a small, dusty settlement at the edge of the wilderness, a line of captives waited, their faces etched with fear, defiance, and sorrow. Among them stood Maya, an Apache woman whose spirit burned brighter than the midday sun, though her chains clinked with every heartbeat. Her eyes, dark and steady, swept over the men who held her captive. She said nothing, but her silence was a shield, a wall built from years of loss. The memory of her village, her family taken, her people scattered, lingered like smoke in her chest. A hot wind carried the scent of leather, sweat, and blood, reminding her that she was still trapped in a world that had no mercy for women like her. The market bell rang, and the crowd stirred. Buyers and traders moved like shadows, whispering, bargaining, deciding fates with a few coins. Maya's gaze did not waver, though her heart pounded. She knew they were speaking about her. "Don't waste your money on me," she said abruptly, her voice steady but cold, directed at the man who seemed the most interested in her. Her words were like fire on dry grass. The man froze, and for a moment the market went silent. Most women would have bowed, lowered their heads, accepted their fate. Maya did not. She had learned long ago that pride could be the only weapon left to someone like her. From the crowd, a figure emerged, riding a tall, black horse that gleamed in the setting sun. Elias the rancher was a man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, though his face betrayed nothing of his past. His eyes, dark and assessing, swept over the captives until they fell on Maya. There was something about her, something that drew him, though he could not name it. She did not flinch, did not beg, and her defiance fascinated him. Most women would bend, would beg for survival. She did not. "Are you speaking to me?" he asked, his voice calm but commanding. "I speak only the truth," Maya replied, holding his gaze. "I am not a possession. I will not be bought. Do not waste your money." Elias dismounted and approached her, boots crunching in the dry dirt. He studied her for a long moment, sensing the fire in her veins and the strength she tried to hide. "Freedom is more than money," he said finally. "I can offer you safety, a chance to live on my land. You may work, yes, but not as a slave. You may choose to leave whenever you wish." Maya's eyes narrowed. "Why would you help me? There is nothing in me worth your kindness." Elias shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Sometimes the right choice is worth more than gold." Her heart skipped. No one had ever offered her freedom without strings, but hope was dangerous. Hope could burn like wildfire if it was betrayed. "I will not owe you anything," she warned. "You will owe nothing," he said, "not even your fear." The captors grumbled and cursed, but Elias' presence was commanding. None dared to argue. Slowly, Maya stepped forward, her chains clinking but her head held high. She followed him to his horse, hesitating only for a moment before climbing on beside him. The ride back to his ranch was long. The desert stretched endlessly, a sea of gold and shadow. Maya kept silent, her eyes scanning the horizon, sensing danger even where none appeared. Elias did not speak much either, but his presence was steady, a shield in the wind and dust. Night fell and the temperature dropped sharply. Stars began to pierce the dark sky, silver points above the desert like scattered jewels. The firelight from their small camp crackled, casting long shadows on their faces. "Why do you help me?" Maya finally asked, breaking the silence. Elias stared into the flames. "I've seen too much suffering. I cannot change the world, but I can choose who to protect. I choose you." Maya's fingers flexed, hesitant. "I have seen people who promise safety. They lie, they take more than they give. I am not easy to keep safe." "Good," Elias said quietly. "I don't expect easy." There was a pause, filled only by the sound of the fire and the distant cry of a coyote. Maya wanted to turn away, to retreat into the armor of her heart, but something in his steady gaze held her. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt a flicker of something she had thought lost: trust. The next day, they rode toward the ranch. The land changed slowly from barren desert to rolling hills dotted with oak and pine. The ranch stretched wide, the barns sturdy, the fields ready for new life. It was a world apart from the harshness of her captivity, yet Maya felt the weight of expectation pressing on her. Elias introduced her to the ranch hands. They nodded politely, wary of her presence. She noticed the difference in their eyes. Some looked at her as if she were fragile, others as if she were a threat. Maya said nothing. Words had power, yes, but actions spoke louder. The first hours of work were quiet. Maya learned quickly, her hands deft, her mind sharp. She could herd cattle with a calm authority, repair fences with practiced ease, and move through the barns with a grace that surprised even Elias. By evening, she stood at the edge of the property, watching the sun sink behind the hills. Elias approached her silently, his silhouette outlined by the fiery sky. "You have strength," he said, watching her, "not just in body but in heart. That is rare." Maya's eyes narrowed. "Strength has its price. I do not give it freely." "Nor should you," he said, "but sometimes it is safer to share it with someone who will not break it." Maya said nothing, only turned her gaze to the horizon. A whisper of wind carried the scent of rain, a promise of storms to come, and storms were exactly what awaited them. As night fell fully, a cry pierced the darkness. It was not an animal, it was human, rough and cruel. From the shadows of the canyon, figures emerged. Bounty hunters, sent by the men who had once held Maya captive, were closing in. Their eyes glinted in the firelight, weapons raised, ready to take what they believed was theirs. Elias stepped in front of Maya, hand on the hilt of his knife, muscles tense. "Stay behind me," he commanded. Maya did not move. Something inside her stirred, a blend of fear, courage, and a defiance that refused to bow. She reached for a nearby branch, her stance steady. The hunters laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the canyon. "Thought you could run, little one?" one sneered. Elias' eyes met Maya's. "Trust me," he said. Maya's lips curved just slightly. She did not need to say it, she already trusted him. But she also knew she would fight. She would fight with every ounce of herself. The first figure lunged and chaos erupted. Horses reared, dust flew, and the night became a blur of motion. Maya swung the branch with precision, striking one man to the ground. Elias moved like a shadow, his strength and skill clear in every motion, deflecting blows, protecting her, and yet never losing control. It was a dance of survival, one that neither had rehearsed but both executed perfectly. In that moment, trust was not spoken, it was shown. And in the heat of danger, a bond began to form, fragile but undeniable. When the dust settled, the bounty hunters had fled, stumbling into the night, defeated. Maya's chest heaved, her body tense, but her eyes shone. Elias approached, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You are remarkable," he said simply. "I survive," she replied, voice steady despite the adrenaline. "That is all." Elias studied her, seeing more than just survival. He saw fire, courage, and a heart that would not bend. For the first time, he felt a longing he did not try to suppress, a desire to know her, to protect her, to stand by her through storms yet to come. As they made camp for the night, Maya gazed at the stars. The desert was quiet again, but she knew it would not stay that way. Danger had followed her, and it would not easily release its grip. Yet, for the first time, she felt a spark of hope, and hope, in a world filled with shadow, was a dangerous and beautiful thing. The night carried whispers on the wind, promises of trials, tests, and choices that would define them both. And somewhere in the dark corners of the desert, someone was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Maya did not know it yet, but the journey she had begun with Elias would change everything. Her freedom, her heart, and her very spirit were now entwined with a man who was both her protector and a challenge to her fierce independence. The first chapter of their story had ended, but the storm had only just begun. The ride from the canyon to Elia's ranch stretched through rolling hills bathed in the golden light of morning. The desert had given way to rugged green, dotted with oaks and wildflowers that swayed in the wind. Maya sat tall in the saddle, muscles taut, senses alert. She was no longer merely surviving. She was learning to move in a world that had offered her freedom but demanded trust. Elias guided his horse with steady hands, silent yet commanding. He had ridden this land alone for many years, and it was rare for him to allow another into his world. Yet something about Maya stirred a careful curiosity within him. She was proud and wary, and he sensed that beneath her sharp edges lay strength waiting to be known. The ranch appeared as the hills opened, a sprawling collection of barns, fields, and sturdy homes. Smoke curled from chimneys, and horses stamped in the stables. The air smelled of hay, earth, and wood, rich and alive. It was a place of life and work, but also of solitude, and Maya felt the weight of its silence press upon her. Elias dismounted first and offered her his hand. "Come," he said simply. "This will be your home for now." Maya's dark eyes swept over the ranch. It was not a fortress nor a palace. Yet there was a presence here, a rhythm to the land, as if the ranch itself had a heartbeat. She kept her hand to herself, letting her fingers brush lightly over the reins before following him down the path to the main house. Inside, the room smelled of polished wood, leather, and warmth. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The ranch hands, young and rugged men, paused their work to stare at the newcomer. Some whispered, others only glanced, unsure whether to offer welcome or caution. "This is your space," Elias said. "You are free to move about, but there is work to be done. It is not easy, but you are strong enough for it, I believe." Maya nodded, keeping her face carefully neutral. Words were not her only tool, actions were often stronger. She felt the subtle tension of being observed, of being measured and judged. Yet she also felt something unusual, a faint spark of acceptance. Her first task was to tend to the horses. She moved among them with the same calm precision she had learned in captivity, her hands gentle yet firm. The animals responded, shifting closer to her, nuzzling her shoulder as if recognizing her quiet strength. Elias watched from the doorway, noting the subtle connection she formed with the creatures. "You have a gift with them," he said. Maya's lips pressed into a thin line. "A gift only if one survives long enough to learn it," she replied softly. Elias chuckled, though it was tinged with sadness. "Perhaps, but it is rare to see someone so capable and cautious at the same time." The day passed with the sun climbing high, the land alive with the sound of work. Maya repaired fences, carried water to the livestock, and learned the rhythms of the ranch. Her hands, calloused yet precise, moved with determination and skill. Yet in quiet moments she would glance at Elias, studying him. He carried himself with authority, yet there was a quiet solitude about him, a shadow she could sense even without words. As the afternoon waned, a strange stillness settled over the ranch. Birds fell silent, the wind held its breath, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should. Maya stopped mid-task, sensing it before Elias even spoke. "You feel it too," he said, voice low. He joined her by the fence, his gaze sweeping the fields. "There is something here, something not natural." Maya's heart quickened. She had grown up among whispers of spirits and the old ways of her people. She had learned to sense danger beyond what the eyes could see. "The land speaks," she said quietly. "It is uneasy." "Something lingers," Elias nodded. "I have felt it for years. Strange losses, strange shadows. I thought it was only superstition, but perhaps not." Maya's curiosity flared, mixed with unease. "What happened here?" she asked. Elias' jaw tightened. "My wife," she tried to lift the curse. "She failed. I have been living with it ever since. I thought it would fade, but it never has. I don't know if it can be lifted at all." Maya's eyes softened, though she kept her voice steady. "Then perhaps it needs someone who knows how to listen, someone who does not fear the land or the shadows." Elias studied her, noting the quiet strength in her tone. Perhaps. Night came quickly, and with it, the sky transformed into a deep blue canvas dotted with stars. The air was crisp, scented with pine and earth. Maya prepared the fire while Elias moved about the ranch, checking locks, securing gates, and observing the surrounding hills. Sitting near the fire, Maya allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The chains of her past had been broken, but her spirit still carried scars. She thought of her family, of the village lost to cruelty and greed. She thought of the captors who had seen her as nothing more than property. Here at the ranch, she felt a strange tension. Freedom, yes, but also responsibility. The ranch was alive with secrets, and she would need all her wits to survive. Elias returned and sat across from her, his expression unreadable in the flickering firelight. "You are different from anyone I have met," he said. "Not only strong but cautious, aware. You do not bend easily." Maya met his gaze steadily. "I cannot bend easily. I have learned that the hard way." A silence fell between them, comfortable yet charged. They shared the quiet understanding of two people who had faced hardship and loss, who knew what it meant to stand alone. The calm of the night was broken by a sudden whisper, faint yet distinct, drifting through the trees surrounding the ranch. Maya stiffened, her ears straining. "You hear it too?" she asked, her voice low. Elias nodded, tense. "Yes, the wind carries voices sometimes, or something else." Maya stood, moving toward the edge of the forest that bordered the ranch. The shadows seemed to stretch, moving as if alive. Her pulse quickened, a mix of fear and anticipation. She had sensed spirits before, and though she did not claim mastery over them, she knew to respect their presence. Elias followed quietly, his hand resting on the hilt of his knife. "Be careful," he said. Maya's eyes scanned the darkness. She saw shapes moving just beyond the trees, shadows that were too deliberate to be natural. Then a faint glow appeared, an apparition, faint and flickering, the shape of a woman. Maya froze, her heart leapt. She recognized the face immediately, her mother. Not as she remembered her, alive and warm, but as a spirit, pale and shining, reaching toward her with silent warning. "Maya," the apparition whispered, voice echoing like wind through leaves. "Danger approaches. The ranch is not as safe as it seems." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She turned to Elias, but he had seen enough to know she was not imagining it. His jaw tightened and his eyes met hers with a mixture of awe and concern. What was that?" he asked, his voice steady despite the tension. Maya shook her head, heart racing. "It was my mother, or something that looks like her. She warns me of danger, and I think it is true. The ranch holds more than shadows. Something is waiting." Elias stood, his posture rigid with determination. "Then we will face it," he said firmly. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Maya's lips pressed into a thin line. She did not trust easily, but in that moment she chose to believe him. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to, because for the first time she did not feel completely alone. The wind picked up, carrying whispers and rustling the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a figure watched from the shadows, unseen but attentive. Danger was near. The ranch was not yet safe. Maya and Elias returned to the fire, but neither spoke much. Words were insufficient to cover what they had seen, what they had sensed. The night was alive with tension, each crackle of the fire a reminder that darkness lingered just beyond the circle of light. As sleep approached, Maya lay under the stars, thoughts racing. She had survived slavery, captivity, and loss. But the ranch was a different kind of challenge. Here, she would not only face enemies of flesh and blood, but forces unseen, ancient and patient, waiting for the right moment to strike. Elias, in his own room, stared at the shadows cast by the fire outside. He thought of Maya, her strength, her courage, and the strange pull he felt toward her. She was defiance in fire, but also something softer, something that challenged the walls he had built around his heart. Neither of them spoke again that night. Words were unnecessary. They had shared the glance of understanding, the touch of trust, the silent promise that they would not face what was coming alone. But the watchers in the darkness did not sleep. Something ancient and patient stirred, sensing the bond forming between the rancher and the woman who would not be broken. The whispers in the wind promised trials yet to come, and the night seemed to close in tighter around the ranch. The fire dimmed, leaving only flickering shadows, and the desert whispered secrets that only those brave enough to listen could hear. Maya's journey had begun, but the true test, the confrontation with darkness, both visible and unseen, was yet to arrive. And somewhere just beyond the light of the fire, a shadow moved closer, waiting for the right moment to strike. The sun rose slowly over the ranch, painting the fields in golden light. Yet despite the morning brightness, a shadow lingered over the land, unseen but deeply felt. Maya stirred awake in her small room near the stables, her heart still racing from the previous night's vision. Her mother's warning echoed in her mind. Danger approaches. The ranch is not as safe as it seems. She dressed quickly, moving quietly through the still ranch. Elias had already been up, tending to the animals and checking the fences. He noticed her presence without turning. There was a weight in his gaze, a mixture of concern and respect that made her chest tighten. "You're up early," he said, voice calm but steady. "I sleep lightly," Maya replied. "The land feels uneasy." Elias nodded. "Yes, I've felt it for a long time, but it grows stronger now." Maya's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" He paused, brushing his hand over a fence post. "The land is restless. Animals vanish, livestock die without reason, and sometimes I hear whispers, voices in the wind. My wife, she tried to end it. She failed. And now it seems whatever was waiting is stronger." Maya's fingers tightened around the reins of the nearby horse. "Then we need to prepare. We cannot wait for it to strike." Elias studied her, impressed by her courage. She had faced chains, captivity, and cruelty, yet here she stood, ready to confront something neither of them fully understood. "Then we start today," he said. "We need to protect the ranch and each other." The first signs of danger came quickly. By midday, several of the ranch hands reported missing livestock. Horses vanished from their pens, cows disappeared from the fields, leaving only hoofprints that led to nowhere. Maya examined the ground, following the tracks with careful attention. Something unnatural had passed here. The prints were too erratic, too strange to belong to any normal animal. "That's not ordinary," she said, looking up at Elias. "Whatever this is, it moves through the shadows almost like it doesn't want to be seen." Elias' jaw tightened. "We need to stay alert. I will not lose anyone else here." By evening, a storm began to gather over the hills. Clouds darkened the sky, and the wind whipped through the trees like restless spirits. Maya and Elias worked together to secure the animals, moving with quiet coordination. They spoke little, but every glance and gesture conveyed trust and understanding. As night fell, the first real attack came. Shadows moved at the edges of the ranch, shapes too fluid to be human, too deliberate to be wind. Maya sensed them immediately. She called out to Elias, pointing to the moving darkness. "They're here," she said, voice sharp. "And they're coming closer." Elias drew his knife, eyes scanning the darkness. "Stay behind me," he ordered, though she did not move. She would not hide while danger threatened those she now cared for. The first shadow leaped from the tree line, a figure shrouded in black, its movements almost unnatural. Maya reacted instinctively, swinging a heavy branch with precision, striking the shadow and forcing it to retreat. Elias moved beside her, blocking attacks, countering with skillful strikes. It was unlike anything Maya had ever faced. The shadows were not fully solid, yet they could harm, could push, could strike fear into the bravest hearts. And yet in the midst of the attack, Maya felt a strange energy awaken within her. Her ancestors' teachings, long buried in her memory, surfaced. She felt the land, the wind, the whispers, and with it, a power she had never known she possessed. She reached out to the shadows, not with fear but with command. "Go back," she shouted, her voice ringing through the darkness. The shadows wavered, recoiling as if her will alone held sway. Elia's eyes widened in surprise, watching her control the unseen forces with skill and confidence. For a moment, the shadows froze and then vanished into the night. The storm seemed to pause with them, a tense silence settling over the ranch. Maya's chest heaved, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "You have power," he said, awe in his voice. "I did not know it was possible." Maya shook her head, still catching her breath. "It is a part of me. My people taught me to listen, to feel the land. That is all." Elias studied her, realizing that she was more than strong or skilled, she was extraordinary. And in that realization, he felt a deep stirring in his heart, a mix of admiration, respect, and a longing he could no longer deny. The following days were a blur of tension and preparation. Maya and Elias worked together to fortify the ranch, setting traps, reinforcing fences, and learning to anticipate the shadows' movements. They shared moments of quiet reflection, speaking of past losses and fears. Maya told Elias of her village, her family, and the years she had spent surviving in captivity. Elias shared pieces of his own story, of love lost and mistakes that haunted him still. In these moments, the bond between them grew. Trust became more than necessity. It became a connection neither of them had expected. Each glance, each gesture carried weight. Each word spoken in the quiet of the night built a fragile bridge between their hearts. Yet danger was never far away. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Maya wandered near the edge of the forest, drawn by a faint glow. There she found an object half buried in the dirt, a small, ornate relic. She recognized it immediately. "It belonged to Elias' wife," she whispered to herself, holding it carefully. The relic seemed to pulse with energy, and as she touched it, visions flooded her mind. The ranch before it was cursed, her husband's grief, and the rituals that had failed to protect it. Elias appeared behind her silently. "You found it," he said, voice low. "I never thought anyone could sense it." Maya turned to him. "It is powerful, dangerous, but it can also guide us. It shows what must be done to lift the curse." Elias took the relic, examining it with care. "Then we will need each other more than ever. I cannot do this alone. And I would rather face it with you than anyone else." Maya's heart stirred. She had never allowed herself to feel safe with anyone before. Yet here in the midst of danger and shadows, she felt an unfamiliar warmth, a quiet trust that had grown stronger each day. That night, the shadows returned. This time they were bolder, attacking the ranch hands and animals with fury. Maya and Elias fought side by side, moving through the chaos with precision. She wielded her power over the shadows, while Elias defended her and the ranch with strength and skill. They saved the livestock, drove the shadows back, and stood together amidst the wreckage. Breathing heavily, they looked at one another, realizing the depth of what they had faced. "You are incredible," Elias said, his voice low, filled with admiration. Maya shook her head, smiling faintly. "I am just surviving like always, but I have you here now." "That makes a difference." Elias' eyes softened. "No, you make the difference. I am lucky to have you at my side." The storm finally passed, leaving the ranch quiet and the sky clear, yet the tension lingered. Both of them knew that the shadows were only growing stronger, that the curse had more to reveal, and that the trials ahead would test them in ways neither could yet imagine. As dawn approached, Maya returned to her room, exhausted but alert. She gazed at the horizon, sensing the lingering presence of her ancestors and the land itself. Something told her the greatest challenge was still to come, a confrontation that would demand every ounce of courage, trust, and strength they possessed. Elias watched her from the doorway, admiring her silently. He knew she carried the power to change the fate of the ranch, and perhaps even his own heart. But he also knew the shadows were not done. Danger, darkness, and tests of spirit still awaited. And in the distance, beyond the hills, a figure watched, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The ranch was no longer just a home. It was a battlefield, a place where courage, loyalty, and love would be forged in fire and shadow. Maya lay beneath the stars, feeling the pulse of the land, her own power and the bond forming between her and Elias. She did not know what lay ahead, but she knew one thing: she would not face it alone. And somewhere in the darkness, the shadow that had been watching moved closer, its intentions still unknown, but its patience unbroken. The storm was not over. The real challenge, the test of heart, will, and trust, was only beginning. The wind howled across the ranch, carrying the scent of rain and something older, darker, and unseen. Shadows twisted in the corners of the fields, and the animals huddled in fear. Maya stood at the edge of the barn, her hands clenched, sensing the weight of the land's unrest pressing on her. She had never felt anything like it. Elias approached quietly, his boots crunching in the dirt. "It's here," he said, voice low, steady. "Whatever haunts this place, it will not wait any longer." Maya nodded, swallowing a lump in her throat. She could feel it, the shadows, restless and sharp, moving with purpose. Her ancestors' teachings whispered in her mind, guiding her, urging her to trust her instincts, to act with courage and precision. "We face it together," she said. Elias' jaw tightened. "Together," he agreed, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. For a moment the storm and the shadows felt smaller, held back by their shared resolve. By midday, the curse revealed itself fully. Shadows no longer hid in the corners. They surged across the fields, coalescing into forms both frightening and unnatural. They clawed at the barns, scattered the livestock, and moved with the intent to destroy. Maya stepped forward, her voice firm. "Go back," she commanded. She raised her hands, drawing on the power within her, the connection to her ancestors, the land, and the spirit of the ranch itself. Light seemed to gather around her fingers, pulsing with energy that made the shadows hesitate. Elias moved beside her, brandishing his knife. He did not wield magic, but his skill and strength were formidable. He blocked the attacks of the shadows, cutting through their forms while Maya's power pushed them back. Together, they were a force that neither could have been alone. But the shadows were cunning. They attacked with cunning, retreating and returning, testing their limits. The sky darkened, clouds rolling overhead and thunder rumbled across the hills. Maya felt exhaustion creep in, but she did not falter. Every movement, every command drew on her courage, her defiance, and her connection to the land. Elias watched her with awe, realizing fully that she was extraordinary. She was not only brave but powerful in ways he could not have imagined. And in that moment, he understood that his own heart, long guarded, was bound to hers. Amid the chaos, the hidden watcher from the hills revealed itself. A shadowy figure emerged, cloaked in darkness, its presence radiating cold and malice. It was the true source of the curse, an ancient force that had lingered over the ranch for decades. "You should not have come here," the figure hissed, its voice like wind through dead leaves. "This land is mine. All who enter will fall." Maya stepped forward, her hands glowing with power. "This land belongs to life, not fear. You will not harm anyone here." The shadow lunged, and Elias intercepted it, his knife cutting through the air with precision. Maya raised her voice, calling on the energy of her ancestors. The relic she had found earlier pulsed in her hand, amplifying her power. Light and spirit collided with shadow and malice in a clash that shook the land. For a moment, it seemed the darkness might win. The wind howled, the rain lashed, and the shadows surged forward, relentless. Yet Maya and Elias did not falter. They moved in perfect coordination, her power guiding the energy, his strength and skill defending their home. The battle reached its climax near the heart of the ranch. Maya lifted the relic, letting its energy flow through her. "I command you to leave," she shouted, her voice ringing like a bell. The shadow screamed, a sound that chilled the bones, and faltered. Elias lunged, striking at the dark heart of its form. Light and shadow collided, and with a final surge of will, Maya focused her power, channeling all the energy she could muster. The shadow shuddered, then dissolved into mist, leaving only silence behind. Rain fell softly now, cleansing the land. The storm passed, leaving the ranch bathed in soft, golden light. Birds emerged, singing once more. The animals calmed, and the air felt alive with renewal. The curse was broken. Maya sank to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. Elias knelt beside her, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. "We did it together." Maya smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting relief and pride. "Yes, together." In the quiet aftermath, they walked through the ranch, surveying the damage. The barns could be repaired, the fences rebuilt, and life would continue. Yet something deeper had changed, not just the land but their hearts. Elias stopped near the fields, turning to Maya. "You were incredible, not just today but every day since you arrived. I have never met anyone like you." Maya looked at him, her dark eyes steady and clear. "I am not the same woman who arrived here weeks ago. This land, this struggle, it has changed me, and so have you." He reached out, taking her hand in his. "I don't want you to leave," he admitted. "Not because you are needed here, but because I cannot imagine this place or my life without you." Maya's lips curved into a faint smile. "I will stay," she said softly. "Not because I owe you anything, but because I want to." The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of earth and rain. The ranch felt alive, healed not only from the curse but from the burdens of the past. Shadows had passed and light had returned. Days later, the ranch was restored. Workers moved through the fields, repairing fences and tending to the animals. Maya and Elias walked together through the land, side by side, no words needed. They had faced danger, fear, and the unknown, and emerged stronger, bonded by trust, courage, and mutual respect. At night, they would sit by the fire, talking quietly, sharing pieces of their past, their dreams, and their fears. Elias had learned to let go of his guilt, to trust again, and to open his heart. Maya had found freedom not just from captivity, but from fear, and she had discovered love that did not demand submission but mutual strength. And though the land still carried echoes of its past, the ranch had become a place of hope. Life, resilience, and courage now walked its fields, visible in every green blade of grass, in every animal that grazed peacefully. One evening, under the light of a full moon, Maya and Elias stood on the porch of the main house. The stars stretched across the sky, bright and unbroken. They held hands, their fingers intertwined, a silent promise that they would face whatever came next together. "Do you ever wonder," Maya said quietly, "if we were meant to meet?" Elias looked at her, eyes reflecting the moonlight. "I think we were. The land brought us together, fate or perhaps something stronger." Maya smiled. "Stronger than fate," she whispered. They stood in silence, feeling the pulse of the land beneath their feet, the warmth of the fire behind them, and the bond that had grown from trial, struggle, and courage. The ranch was no longer just a home, it was a symbol. A symbol of endurance, of love that grew from respect and courage, and of hearts transformed by trust and shared strength. And though the shadows had been defeated, Maya knew that vigilance was a part of life. She could feel the lingering whispers of the land, reminders that nothing truly vanishes, only sleeps. Yet now, she faced them not as a captive or a survivor, but as a guardian, a partner, and a woman who had claimed her freedom and her destiny. Elias squeezed her hand gently. "Whatever comes, we face it together," he said. "Yes," Maya agreed, looking out over the fields. "Together." The wind whispered through the oaks, gentle now, carrying the promise of new beginnings. The ranch glowed in the light of dawn, its fields ready for life, its hearts ready for love, and its land finally free from the shadows that had haunted it for so long. In the distance, the mountains stood tall, silent witnesses to the story that had unfolded. The storm had passed, the darkness had been faced, and two souls once broken and guarded had found each other and themselves in the process. The night was calm, the ranch was safe. And for the first time in a long while, both Maya and Elias felt the quiet, profound joy of peace, of freedom, and of love earned through courage and trust. The story had reached its end, but the land whispered softly, reminding them that life would continue. Shadows might stir again, but together nothing could break them.